week on the podcast, we have a guest on. Now, this is actually the second guest that we interviewed, but the first one we're going to broadcast. So if you hear references to guest ordering, that'll explain it. So let us know what you think about having more guests on. Get in touch with the show at Gmail, Dad's Got Another Tattoo at gmail.com, or on social media where we're at Dad's Got Another Tattoo. Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Mum, Dad's Got Another Tattoo, the Midlife Crisis podcast. I'm Mark and I'm here with my co-host Richard.
Hello.
Hello Richard. Now today's a very exciting day because even though it's our second guest, this one seems to know what he's talking about. An actual doctor of testosterone replacement therapy, as I struggled saying last week. Here on it, we'll call it TRT or HRT for blokes. That's another way of thinking about it as well. Now,
and can I stop you there? Until he said that, I'd never thought of it like that.
Well, you're ruining the illusion. We're meant to be talking as if we haven't spoken to him.
Cut it.
No, we have spoken to, well, I spoke to Dr. Choo from the Manual, who is a private provider of testosterone replacement therapy. It's the provider that I use as well. I've been on it for about 6 months, so hopefully in the next half an hour, we go through some of the questions that I had before we went on to that. And then afterwards, we'll reconvene. And Richard, you can give us your reflections on that. But let's get a guest on. So I'd like to welcome to Mum, Dad's Got Another Tattoo, Dr. Choo. Dr. Lewis is Senior Specialist Doctor in TRT at Manual and Training Lead for new doctors joining the team. He's got over 9 years of experience as a doctor working in hospital medicine, urology and general practice, and he continues his work in NHS general practice alongside his work at Manual. He's passionate about men's health and optimising health through lifestyle, and as an avid gym goer, he can see firsthand the consequences of self-serving testosterone without medical supervision. So, taking that last line there, you've probably advised against getting on Reddit, doing about half an hour of research, ordering some off the internet, and start banging in 200 milligrams a week. Welcome to the show, Lewis.
Thank you so much, Mark. And yes, absolutely. That's a terrible idea for multiple reasons, actually. One, you don't even know if the stuff you're getting off the black market actually has testosterone in it. That's the first thing. You don't know what other things they've put in there. It's not regulated in the same way that pharmaceutical medicines are. And also, you don't quite know whether the dose you're giving yourself is what you need and what levels your testosterone might reach on that dose.
Yeah, that is something that I was actually surprised about, because once I should declare that I am on the testosterone replacement therapy with Manual, and my experience has been highly positive. I was actually a little bit disappointed when I was given my prescription, because a lot of the online research, they also go through clinics, but particularly in the US, 200 milligrams a week seems to be a starting point, and I was prescribed 90, and I thought, is that all? But in the event, that turned out probably to be even just a tad too high for me as well. So yeah, I'd totally take on board that. I looked into this because I'm over 45. I changed a lot of lifestyle issues, and I still wasn't feeling as good or as great as someone doing all that sort of stuff should. Is, you know, the over 45, over 40s, is that the sort of cohort that for whom this starts to be an issue? And what should you be looking out for if you want to start investigating this?
Absolutely, yeah. So just to come back there and reflect on sort of your personal experience as well. Yes, the dosages in America and actually all over the world will really vary, but the thing is, it's all about tailoring the regimen to the individual. For someone like yourself, maybe 90 milligrams a week might be too much, and actually for others, even 100 and even 150 milligrams a week might be too little. So it's all about making sure that the program that you're on is really tailored to you. And so thinking about that, if you're thinking about going on to testosterone replacement therapy, when should you really be thinking about this? So typically, you're right. It tends to affect men as they get older. Through various reasons, we know that aging tends to result in testosterone levels getting lower. It tends to be more common in people who have metabolic conditions already. So, things like if you're carrying too much weight, if you're obese, if you have problems with blood sugar, so if you're diabetic, if you have other features as well of the metabolic syndrome, as it's often called, so high cholesterol, things like that. Because all of these conditions are actually really closely linked towards having testosterone deficiency, and correcting testosterone deficiency actually can really help improve these conditions. In fact, there's a wealth of research showing the benefits of testosterone replacement therapy at preventing diabetes and even reversing it. So actually, really, really useful to look at if you've got other health issues going on. But what if you don't have health issues? And what if you're someone who's relatively fit and healthy? When should you really be thinking about testosterone? So really, I would say if you're someone who's, like yourself, Marc, maintaining really good lifestyle habits, eating well, exercising regularly, sleeping well as well, because sleep is really important for testosterone production. If you're doing all these things and you're still feeling tired, not getting that joy from life anymore, you've lost that sort of silver lining in the clouds, that's really when you should maybe think, is testosterone contributing here?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that really prompted me, is that I guess on the flip side to that, the argument isn't that just getting old? You get to your mid-40s, you're not 21 anymore, no matter how much your brain tells you are, and you just have to slow down. That seems to be the flip. Isn't that just, we just defying nature and by slowing down that aging process?
Absolutely, that's a very valid way of looking at things, and I think the world had a very similar view with women going through menopause a couple of decades ago. It's just part of the natural biological process, and just sort of get on and live with that. But actually, attitudes towards menopause have really shifted, and now the conversation around treating women with menopausal symptoms in a positive way and really helping them, support them, maintain a really good quality of life, that's become a real really accepted part of the medical community now. And I think testosterone replacement therapy is going through a very similar shift in paradigm as we speak. So yes, you could just accept things and live your life feeling really tired and miserable all the time. But is that how you want to spend your life between 45 and 72, as the average age of death is? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that really kicked off my investigations, because I was tired all the time. And I think that sort of little bit of zip goes as well. I'd spent like my 30s in quite a competitive work environment, and I actually really loved that. I felt energized by it. And sort of post-COVID as well, I'd done what most people had done, I guess, which is, drunk a bottle of wine every night, watching Tiger King on the sofa. And then when I decided to undo all that damage, the speed with which changes would come across and the amount of work that I could physically do, whether that was at the gym or, just having the discipline to do that, it was becoming harder and harder to do. And we can either accept that's just a bit of age creeping in, or do something about it. And I've always been someone who to take action, so that's what I did. Are there any other symptoms that people should be looking out for if they to reflect that they may be suffering from low testosterone as well?
Absolutely. So just to go through that really clearly, there are a couple of common symptoms that tend to be present in men with low testosterone, and these are problems particularly with sexual function, so losing your interest or desire for sex or low libido, and having problems with erections, and particularly losing erections in the morning. Those spontaneous erections that you might find yourself waking up with just no longer appearing. That's often a really important predictor of low testosterone. Other symptoms are like reduced energy levels, having, like you said, Marc, low levels of motivation, problems with your mood, problems concentrating. And obviously with muscle, with testosterone and its role in sort of maintaining muscle, losing your muscle and increasing your fat around, particularly the tummy area. But there are also some lesser known symptoms that tend to occur with low testosterone. So things like not having as much body hair anymore. Things like having low bone density. So if you're someone who's maybe had a couple of fractures in your life, that's also something that could be related to having low testosterone.
Yeah, it's interesting about the sexual function element of it, that I guess it would be a slow decline in mine, that almost imperceptible, that post that I have noticed, that's where you should be. And the absence of the morning erection doesn't actually seem to be a problem at all. In fact, I actually found that to be a benefit, that I could actually get up and get on with my day without, without being inhibited by that. And so it's interesting that is seen as a great indication of it. So I guess if you're on that, is there any other things that people should look out for in terms of medical history, or whether that's personal or family, that would cause you to approach this with a bit more caution?
Absolutely. So historically, attitudes towards testosterone replacement therapy were a lot more conservative than we are today. That's because the data around safety was really murky. The quality of evidence being used was really quite poor. We basically got a group of older men, all aged over 70, gave them all testosterone without any comparator group. And of course, older men tended to have strokes and heart attacks. And so there was this sort of black box warning that TRT may cause strokes and heart attacks. But actually, recently we've published a really, we, the medical community, published a really comprehensive randomized controlled trial looking at the effects of testosterone against a placebo control, and found that there was actually no difference in the rate of having a stroke or heart attack. And actually, as a result of that publication, the FDA over in America removed the black box warning about strokes and heart attacks. So one, we used to be worried about people who either had a stroke or heart attack in the past, or who had a significant family history of this, and to caution them against TRT. But actually, nowadays we don't really, we're not that concerned anymore, because we know the safety data is really good. Other historical concerns were around prostate cancer. There was this concern that TRT might fuel prostate cancer, but actually, increasingly, we're seeing that the data around the effects of testosterone on prostate cancer is, again, really murky. There's no clear evidence that TRT actually causes prostate cancer. If anything, the data around this is showing that it's probably relatively safe. However, this is still an emerging area. So for now, we still approach prostate cancer with a bit of concern.
I was going to mention that actually, because as I'm over the age of 45, your colleagues were rather insistent on getting good PSA blood test numbers, and also a physical examination, which not the most pleasant thing to go through, but I guess it at least proved my dedication to getting through that. But the other thing I think is a nice side effect of this, if that's the right term, is that by having regular blood work, having this sort of examinations and a much closer monitoring of your health, especially at the beginning of a TRT journey, is that it actually gave me a lot of comfort that, I didn't have cancer every time. Your mind can run away with you a little bit. And also it prevents you from, if you do have a problem, from putting your head in the sand. You get your numbers, and these can be very early warning systems, and it definitely stops you from, as I say, putting your head in the sand. And as men are notorious for not approaching their GP for anything, I've found this has been a real comfort to me. But also, as I say, a good early warning system in place if anything were to start to emerge.
Absolutely. As you know, the UK doesn't have a national screening program for prostate cancer, and most men will never have a PSA blood test until they run into problems later on in life. And actually, as a result of being on a medically monitored program, you'll get regular blood tests that will, first of all, you'll get a PSA test at the outset, so you'll know your baseline. But equally, while you're on treatment, you'll continue to have that being monitored. I did want to mention an additional group as well who might want to maybe have a bit more caution with their thoughts around testosterone therapy, and that's men who maybe are actively trying to conceive, men who actually want to have a child, because there is going to be dampening down of fertility while you're on testosterone replacement therapy on its own. There are additional medications that we can offer either instead of or alongside testosterone therapy. But if you're someone who's maybe thinking about having a child in the near future, it's just something to make sure that you discuss really thoroughly with any doctor that you speak to about testosterone therapy.
Yep, that was certainly a question asked of me during the initial process. My family is complete. And it's one of the few things my wife was very positive about. Absolutely 100% complete. So, but yeah, that is something. And the additional medicine, I guess you'd be reluctant to do that because for every medication that you're adding into the mix, it sort of proliferates the potential downsides to that. Is that right?
Well, actually, our internal data show that most men tend to have better outcomes on treatment when they're on a combination of medicines. So actually, being on testosterone on its own, you get pretty good results. But actually, if you take, for example, testosterone and you combine that with something like HCG, you actually, for any given testosterone level, get better symptomatic relief. And that's because HCG will act on different receptors in the body and work sort of synergistically alongside the testosterone. So actually, we tend to prefer most of our patients to be on some form of combination treatment.
And if, let's say there's somebody who is presenting with these symptoms, are there a group that you say, right, we're not going to be able to treat this? Is there, and what characteristics do they exhibit?
Yeah. So as we've talked about, testosterone deficiency tends to be more prevalent and more common as you get older. Again, it tends to be related to age-related decline in your natural testicular function. So conversely to that, if you're someone who's maybe in your 20s and we're seeing tests sort of your testosterone level be a little bit low, we'd maybe think that, what's actually going on here? What's the driver for this? Are you someone who's sort of reached your physiological maximum? Or are you someone who's still going through that process of sort of getting towards your peak testosterone level? So for men who are relatively young, and when I say relatively young, under 30, we tend to approach this with a little bit more caution. Not to say we definitely don't ever treat, but it's just we need to be really, really sure what's actually causing the testosterone deficiency before we offer any treatment.
And what are some of the misconceptions about this? The treatment that I'm on requires you to literally inject yourself as, a steroid bodybuilder would. I mean, I've had no experience of that whatsoever. But, does that mean all your hair's going to fall out, you're going to be spotty and, you're just going to be a bawling mess of rage all the time? Is that something that you see in testosterone replacement therapy doses?
So many misconceptions there, Marc. Where do I even start with that one? Yes, there is this stigma with testosterone replacement therapy and its association with anabolic steroid users who sort of use testosterone for non-medical purposes and go really, 4 to 5 times above the dosages that we'd be prescribing for replacement therapy. So to answer your question, if you're taking testosterone in sort of prescribed physiologic doses, absolutely not. There's no correlation there with turning into a hulking bodybuilder, if that's a worry. And in terms of aggression and sort of and rage. Again, studies. There was a really good meta-analysis done with quite a few different studies involving around about 360 patients in total, who that looked at the impact of testosterone on mood and assessed this using a validated questionnaire. And actually, there was a really positive impact of testosterone therapy on mood. In fact, there was no study has actually shown a consistent effect at causing aggression for testosterone.
My personal experience reflects that as well, is that if anything, I feel a bit more chill about the world. That with a little bit of assertiveness, I would say, may come into that, is that, you're not, I guess if people are worried you're going to your testosterone levels return to that of a 21-year-old, and then you end up having the mentality of a 21-year-old as well, wanting to go around fighting the world. That's certainly not been my experience. It's been that, the phrase that, I wish I know now. Well, I wish I knew what I know now when I was younger. I kind of feel a little bit like that, where I've, hopefully got some degree of maturity as I've got older, but I've now regained the sort of drive and energy of someone who's much younger, and that's been very positive for me.
And that's really great to hear. Really, really great.
And so I've been a sort of a eulogizer and evangelist about this, but not get on it. I want people to essentially have a blood test, first of all. That is the number one thing. Have a blood test and find out where you are. And I do know friends of mine that have higher testosterone levels within the normal range, but still towards the bottom end of that range. So, you get the printout, it says you're within normal ranges. So maybe not enough to make it a slam dunk that you're on this, but not so much that, you can say that physical function is as it should be. What's those sort of no man's land people? How should they approach this?
Absolutely. I think this is a really great area for us to talk about. So, so according to the guidelines that we work with, the British Society of Sexual Medicine guidelines, to be testosterone deficient, strictly you need a total testosterone level below 12 nanomoles per liter. Now, there's this sort of gray area between 12 and 15, where the guidelines say if you're on testosterone replacement therapy, we should aim for a therapeutic level, a normal testosterone level between 15 and 30. So that means, that's basically them saying that this is a normal testosterone level. But then what do we do with the men who fall between 12 and 15, who aren't strictly testosterone deficient, but also aren't strictly, in the therapeutic range? What do we do with them? And this is where the earlier conversation about sort of diabetes and pre-diabetes comes in, because actually there's a wealth of evidence to show that if you give pre-diabetic men who are sort of between 12 and 14 testosterone replacement therapy, you can reduce their chances of developing diabetes in the future. So there's some really good metabolic benefits of being on testosterone. And what if you don't have pre-diabetes or any sort of problems with your metabolism? What do you do in that zone? I think it's about being really pragmatic in this patient group. One approach might be to give lifestyle a really, really good go. But if you're someone who's already, like I say, sleeping well, exercising regularly, eating well, doing all the right things, and you're still feeling the same symptoms, with a conversation with your doctor, it may still be worth the trial of treatment, provided that you sort of understand that it's a bit of a grey area.
And you mentioned the trial period. I guess maybe this is a misconception as well, is that, so my understanding is once you start introducing exogenous testosterone to your system, your natural levels basically shut off in the end, because it detects that there's enough in there. And then let's say 6 months later you think, well, this isn't for me for whatever reason. Are you going to have a hard time coming off of it?
Absolutely not. So in our experience, we've had multiple patients who, for one reason or another, have had to either come off of treatment temporarily or come off of treatment altogether. And they've all been able to get back to their pre-treatment levels of testosterone. And I'll just give you a few statistics around this. So if you were to be on testosterone on its own, so without the support of HCG there to really stimulate your natural production, the rate of recovery within 6 months of stopping testosterone is about 60 to 70%. So 60 to 70% of men who stop treatment will have recovered their natural function within 6 months. That number goes up to 99% by 2 years. So actually, you'll always be able to go back to your natural levels of testosterone. It's just a question of when. Most people actually will restore their natural function in the time span of just a couple of weeks.
All right. And I guess the concern is not necessarily getting back to those levels, but the journey back there. So, all right, I'll get back to my normal level in 6 months, but if I feel absolutely terrible for those 6 months, is that worth it in terms of getting it on it in the first place? Is that something you can comment on?
Absolutely. So for any patient of ours who's on a testosterone replacement program, we would offer them a stopping protocol, which is really designed to help to minimize any discomfort or unpleasantness during the stopping process. So we'd offer them a trial of HCG, which will really help to rapidly restore your body's natural function. So provided that you and actually, to be fair, even if you weren't to go onto the stopping protocol, just by stopping treatment, you might feel a little bit awful for a couple of weeks, but actually, most of the time, that's a short-lived experience.
Okay, and so once someone gets onto this, it's, all medications have some degree of side effects. What are some of the more common ones?
Absolutely. So great. So some of the common side effects that we see. I like to think of side effects in a couple of groups. So there's three major side effects which I like to think about, and then there are a couple of smaller print ones. So some of the more serious side effects to think about is one, like we talked about, and during the period that you're on treatment, a sort of suppression of your own natural testosterone production. So that's one side effect to be aware of. Like I say, that does recover with time, and also it can be supported during your treatment with HCG. The second one to think about is to do with your blood. So one of the actions of testosterone is that it increases your red blood cell production, which is really good because it means your blood can carry more oxygen to your muscles, to your brain. It's how you get some of the benefits from testosterone treatment. But the problem with having too many red blood cells floating around is your blood becomes a little bit more thick and sticky. Your heart has to pump a bit harder to move it around. You might get a bit of a higher blood pressure. The treatment for this is actually pretty straightforward. Just go donate some blood, because if you get rid of some of the red blood cells you're producing, you'll be back to square one. The third major risk to be aware of is estrogen. So so in the body, testosterone is converted to estrogen, and the sort of rate that this can happen is determined by two things. One is alcohol consumption, and the other one is body fat levels. If your estrogen levels get a little bit high, you may notice sort of a regression in sort of how well you're feeling. You might sort of notice the same symptoms of testosterone deficiency coming back in. You might notice a little bit of fluid retention, particularly around the ankles, or you might get some nipple sensitivity. So these are sort of the major risks that I like to caution patients about. Some of the milder risks to be aware of, and these tend to be quite infrequent. You might get a bit of acne and oily skin. You might notice a bit of hair thinning if that's something you were already predisposed towards. And if you had certain medical conditions like existing prostate cancer, heart failure, or obstructive sleep apnea, these conditions may get worse on treatment.
Yeah, I've part of my blood work has shown that hematocrit, is that the right term for?
Absolutely.
For red blood cell. Now, I used to, I still do. I follow cycling, but in the 90s, hematocrit levels above 60 were as a part of that EPO era of cycling, but also means your blood basically turns into jam, and you have 21-year-old Belgians having heart attacks in hotel rooms somewhere. So something to be mindful of. My hematocrit sort of, when I had the blood tests in the investigation period, it sort of bounced around between 52 if I was particularly dehydrated, and maybe 46, maybe 44, I can't remember off the top of my head, post blood donation. Is 50 the magic level for that? And is there any reason for it being there? Is like above that, is it starting to get a little bit too thick? How do you think about that?
Sure. So hematocrit, the upper limit of normal on most reference, most lab reports will be set at 50. But actually, from a testosterone replacement therapy point of view, we draw the line at 54. So anywhere between 50 and 54, although strictly it's a little bit higher than what the lab would like you to be at, it's a little bit higher than normal, it's still within the range of tolerance. Where we draw the line, and even when we draw the line at 54, it's still a pretty conservative level.
I was around that, I think, but I don't know. There's a lot of placebo or mental. I personally felt that my blood pressure was rising a little bit. It's normally really quite good, but I wanted to. And in my previous blood test, I'd done it maybe the day after I donated blood, and so that was like in the mid-40s. That was fine. Yeah. I wanted to see what it was prior to blood donation, and that's when the higher number came out. And in my retest, I subsequently donated again, and it did come down as you say, and that's a good side effect, but it's also a good thing to do, right?
Absolutely.
I also found out my blood type for the first time. I had absolutely no idea. My wife's got a very rare blood type, so she's on the blood donation register, and she gets text messages because she's got one of her many rare attributes is a blood type.
A desirable blood type.
Yeah, indeed. So and it's one of those things that where you want to do it, that you should, but it's just getting round to it, and this is a great motivation for doing that. In the short term, like in the first few weeks, I guess there's this fabled honeymoon period. And I definitely felt better almost immediately when I did it. I think I had a really, I don't know if it's unusual, but a really quick reaction to it. I mean, I built a shed in the...
Wow.
Which I know. I mean, wow is I'm not one of life's handymen, but I've got this flat pack shed through, and I basically got up at 6 a.m. and built it, and I was absolutely flying at that time. Maybe all in my mind, who knows? But is that... that short-term burst where maybe your internal production and the external production is working in tandem. Is that a thing, or is that just an old wives' tale?
Probably more the latter. So I normally tell patients that, results will vary, and it can take up to the full 3 to even 6 months to really realize the benefits. Not to discount your experience at all, Marc. Lots of my patients have also had the same experience, and within the first 6 weeks have told me how they've, really turned their lives around, got better energy, got better mood, noticed their erections get stronger, even if they never realized there was a problem to begin with, noticed that their focus at work has really improved. So lots and lots of these sort of symptomatic benefits that you notice within the first couple of weeks can really happen. And actually, if you were to stay on treatment longer, there's some even better benefits as well that you might not necessarily feel day to day. So I keep coming back to this, but about metabolic health, improving your risk of developing certain medical conditions like diabetes, improving your cholesterol levels, having muscle mass, and that contributing towards your bone strength. Again, all these things that you might not necessarily feel day to day, but as you get older in life, these things start to become a lot more important, and a lot more important markers for things like mortality and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly, as I say, I'm, I guess you could use me as a poster boy for the benefits of it. I've absolutely loved it from the very beginning. I mean, from my point of view, what's the downside? The downside is you've got to inject yourself with this stuff. And I've also, on this podcast, talked about Mounjaro and Ozempic and the injections that you have to give for that. It's a little bit more than the preloaded pen. I got a vial of testosterone, and I think it's like 29G. What does that mean in a syringe?
It's a pretty smallish needle. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I inject in my quad. I alternate between one and the other every other injection. And so my injection at the moment, my dosage is 80 milligrams a week. And I split that across 2. I mean, is that a normal thing to do? I mean, the reason my independent research, if it can be called that, is that the more frequent injections gives you a more stable level, and basically you just don't have any dips in it. And it seems to be working for me. I basically never feel tired during the day now. That is one of the things that I've found, is that I sleep really well. I wake up about between 5:30 and 7, depending on other factors. And then I'm awake, and I never get that post-lunch dip, never feel fatigued in the early evening, never fall asleep after dinner, anything like that. And I go to bed about 10, 11 o'clock, and I just fall asleep like clockwork. Is that testosterone replacement therapy at work?
Well, it certainly is a very common experience in most of my patients. So I'm really, really glad that you're experiencing that, Marc. To comment on what you said about sort of dosing and frequency of dosing, when when sort of the testosterone esters were first brought to market, they were licensed as intramuscular injections only, and to be injected at a frequency of once every 3 weeks even, when what we tend to see is that if you were to inject using that frequency, you would get a really, really high testosterone level for a good couple of days, much higher than you would if you were doing what you're doing, Marc, which is microdosing. You would get a really high level for a couple of days. And then in the final few days before you're due your next injection, you would get a bit of a crash and you would really notice the symptoms come back in. And so as a result, we tend to prefer patients actually to do more frequent, smaller injections.
And for people who just cannot get on with needles, are there any other alternative application methods?
From a testosterone point of view, we do have gels, so that's another option. We could also use Clomid, which is another one of the fertility medicines, and that's a tablet.
Because I wasn't keen on the idea of injecting, I'll be honest, but now I do it. It's just part of my sort of weekly routine, and it's absolutely fine, doesn't hurt at all, and it's more of a mental thing. The other thing I didn't really like about gel is that I understand that it depends on where you rub it in. The absorption rate might not be as good, and it's there are compromises that you have to make. And I felt that if I was going to go on this, I didn't want to make that compromise. Is that a fair reflection?
100%. So gels, the absorption will vary man to man, depending on how sweaty you are, how much body hair you have, and also sort of what your activity levels are like. And the problem is you have to keep applying it every day. It's just this thick, goopy thing that you've got to like rub on your shoulder, every day. And the problem with gels as well, from a doctor's point of view, is it's really difficult to precisely move someone's testosterone level. You can either go up 1 pump, 2 pumps, 3 pumps, but you can't really sort of target a precise dose that really matches what your patient needs. And so that's my biggest frustration really with gels.
And even when you get into the liquid injections, there's different types of those as well. So I'm on testosterone cypionate, which I chose, if I'll be honest, because it was the most expensive and therefore I thought it might be the best. And there wasn't that big a price difference between one or the other. And so I just went for that one. Is that fair? Is that the best one? Is the most expensive for that reason? And anything else is a bit of a compromise, or is it just a different way it aromatizes, or whatever the right nomenclature is?
That's great. And I agree with you. Cypionate is the best drug, but not because it's the most expensive. It just happens to be the most expensive. The reason that I like Cypionate the most is for a couple of reasons. One, although you find the big 10 ml vial a bit of a cumbersome thing to sort of have to draw out from, it's a lot easier than the 2 ml glass ampules that you have to snap if you were to be prescribed something like Sustanon or Enanthate. You've then got it's tiny little glass things. Even I don't know how to really snap them without worrying about cutting my finger. So that's one reason. The other big reason is with Cypionate, although you're injecting into your thigh, Marc, actually Cypionate, for a lot of our patients, we can get them injecting into their belly fat subcutaneously, which is a much shallower injection than going deep into a muscle. And for a lot of patients, this is a real benefit. The third reason which I really like Cypionate is because it's a much thinner oil, and it doesn't cause any as many injection site reactions as some of the other thicker esters like Sustanon or Enanthate. So for a couple of reasons, it's just a lot more preferable to be on Cypionate as opposed to any of the other testosterone esters.
Yeah, so far I've had absolutely no problems with it. Every now and then, like just before I put the needle in, I've like sort of tense up a little bit, but again, that's all in my mind. The actual physical sensation of it is barely noticeable. You mentioned as well the longer term benefits. Is this like once you get dialed in and you find out what your dose is, whatever that might be, is that like a stable equilibrium, or is it eventually, some of the other hormonal aspects, like you mentioned estrogen before and all the others, do they sort of slowly get out of out of whack. You can see I'm a real expert in the and that you have to adjust, or once you're dialed in, that's it forever?
By and large, provided things in your environment stay the same, once you're dialed in, you will pretty much be good to go. We've had patients who've been on treatment, 5 years plus, who stayed on the same dose, not had to change anything. The bloods are consistent. It's always just, and every review is like clockwork. That things really just work. But if something were to significantly change in your day to day, if, for example, you went through a spell where you gave up going to the gym as frequently, you maybe put on a bit of extra weight, maybe you start drinking a little bit more alcohol, that can really throw your estrogen out of whack. And that can really disrupt someone who's already dialed into treatment. But provided that things in your environment stay the same, by and large, once you're sort of steady, you'll be good to go.
And we mentioned that if people have to stop for a little while, they can get back to their normal levels quite quickly. Does that apply to any sort of treatment lengths? And if you're doing this for 10 years, is it harder, or is it, and you have to stop for any reason? Particularly, some of the concerns that have been put to me is that what if I can't afford it for a bit, and I have to come off of it? Is that the end of the world for 6 months or whatever it might be? But I know you touched on this before, but I just wanted to get a little bit more detail about that.
Yeah, sure. So remember, the reason that most men are on testosterone therapy in the first place is because they have low levels of testosterone and they are feeling really awful every day. So when you stop testosterone replacement therapy, the maximum you'll ever be able to reach again is where you were before you went on to treatment. You'll never be any higher than that. The longer that you're on testosterone replacement therapy, and if you're not on something like HCG or Clomid to help to stimulate your testicles throughout treatment to function, the more challenging it may be for you to then subsequently come back to where you were before going on to treatment, which is why I say we prefer most of our patients to have some form of combination treatment. But it's not to say it's impossible, and it's not to say that you're going to be feeling awful for the whole 6 months, although you were feeling awful before you came on to treatment. So it's often, the longer that you're on treatment, you often tend to forget how things were like before being on treatment.
One of the side effects that is certainly true is the testicle shrinkage, which appears to be a problem, if it is a problem at all, for men rather than women. I haven't spoken to a lot of women about this, I'll be honest, but the feedback and anecdotal evidence from other people on it as well is that your wife doesn't care about the size of your balls at all.
No, yeah.
But it is true.
It can do, yeah. And again, HCG would help with that.
Yeah. Well, great. I don't have any more questions. So let's say someone's listening to this, they want to get in touch with Manual and start this process. What do they do?
Well, that's really, really great. And I think we've tried to make the process as straightforward for prospective patients as much as possible. So if you were interested and you think you might have testosterone deficiency, first thing to do is just go onto our website and order yourself a finger prick blood test, because that's just going to really quite quickly show you a snapshot of where your testosterone levels are. If the testosterone levels are pointing towards testosterone deficiency on that test, then we'll offer you a more comprehensive venous blood test, which looks at a bunch more different markers and really try to confirm whether or not you've got low testosterone. Then after that, you'll get booked in to speak to a doctor and you might be on treatment and feeling a lot better.
Dr. Lewis Choo, thank you so much for your time. I'm hopeful that our conversation today has been helpful to our audience, which typically consists of men in the age group. So I really appreciate all the information you've given. And yeah, if you do want to get started, Manual is a great place to start. I've gone through that process as well, and I've had nothing but positive experience, not only from a medical point of view, but from a client service point of view as well. All your colleagues have been extremely helpful, both in the investigation part as well and post-treatment as well, and not even being paid to say that. Can you believe it?
Thank you so much for that feedback, Marc. That's really, really kind.
No, thank you for your time this afternoon. Great to talk to you. Thanks for being on the show.
Great, thank you. Real pleasure.
Okay, so what do you think of that, Rich? Did that answer all your questions, or are there still some outstanding, do you think?
Genuinely, I mean, why should I be surprised that a doctor knew a lot about what he was talking about? He was utterly fantastic. He was really, good, really was.
I would like to put a little caveat in, though, because obviously he is pro TRT, HRT for blokes. I'm obviously pro it as well because I've had a very good experience.
Don't mention it.
Well, it's either that or tattoo, so you know. You pick your
poison.
Yeah, pick your poison. But I thought it was good. But when I listened back to it, I felt it lacked a little bit of balance, maybe because we've had such positive views. Then and I'll give you an example, because in the interim period between the recording of that and now, I had a slight experience, very short term, that wasn't 100% positive, and it relates to one of the points that he made. So one of the questions that we've been asked and that I asked was, if you start this and then you come off of it, like what is
that was my question. That was my main question. Yeah.
I felt he skirted over that a little bit, because after 6 months, I think statistically you will be back to roughly where you were before you started it. However, I think the journey to get there is a little bit rougher than advertised.
You can say, it's 6 months. Someone's got to live those 6 months.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a rough 6 months. It's not on the same level, but when someone's trying to give up drugs, it's 6 months. Well, you walk that walk. Yeah, and it's rough.
Let me give you an even acuter insight into that. So I had something that happened with regards to my treatment that gives a little insight into what that might be like. We covered the fact that I started off on what I thought was quite a low dose, given the amount of Americans that on Reddit that start at 200 milligrams a week. I started on 90. And because of my testosterone numbers for blood tests and hematocrit levels, how thick your blood is, it was recommended that I came down from 90 to 80. So only a 10 milligram difference. And after a month, I basically sent them an email saying, this is unbearable. I can't continue with this, because I remember on the Saturday, I had something that I have not had once on my 90 milligram dosage. I had real bad anxiety. I've been to the gym 4 times that week. The last session, I just felt, you know what, fuck this. I'm not doing it anymore.
No alcohol, nothing like that.
No, nothing. But I was so it was just like a normal training week for me that I've been absolutely bashing out. And then the fourth one, I thought I'm just fucked. I can't do this. Felt like worse than when I went onto it, and that's only a decline, like a smaller dosage of like 10 milligrams.
So what would the outcome be if you went from 90 or 80 to nothing?
Yeah, exactly. Which
and my question to you was that I put to you about my fears of it, because you know me, I'm open to this stuff, and it's one of those first times where I'm like, well, I'm looking at the pros and the cons. It's one of those things, if you start it, you've got ultimately be on it for, it's a commitment. It's a lifelong commitment. And my question to you to ask the doctor was, say your situation changes. It's 100, 120, 130 pounds, whatever it is a month, but people's situation change. What happens if you can't afford that and you have to come off it? And that was my worry. If your social situation makes you have to come off it, then what happens? That was my concern.
Yeah, I felt he skirted over that a little bit, because I think it would be rough. Honestly, I do. I think, but depending on how long you've been on it for as well.
Yeah.
Like if you've been on it for 5 years and are totally flying high on it, And I feel absolutely amazing on like 90 milligrams. I'd say that is definitely the sweet spot.
Being with you, you can see the difference.
Yeah, it is a real difference. But that, and I'm saying I came down a little bit in dosage. It was like 3.5 weeks, and I felt it immediately. I felt terrible as well. So I felt that skirted over it a little bit. But at the time, I didn't have the experience myself to challenge him. So kind of.
And it's a very new science as well. It's a very new science where.
I don't think it's that new. I don't think it's that. I think it's not in terms of the scientific application. I think it's definitely becoming more mainstream. Absolutely. As a treatment, there's no doubt about that. But then, I mean, maybe you could have an optimistic view of the progression of technology through this. Is that I'm injecting myself in the thigh twice a week at the moment. I mean, it takes 5 minutes. It's nothing, right? And but I would assume that in the future things. So, and was there anything else that was a surprise to you, or?
No. I think what was quite jarring was our view on dosage compared to other countries.
Yeah.
View on dosage.
What I find through just like the online communities that I'm a part of and try and contribute to that is that they have more side effects. So the closer that you get to like what they call super physiological amounts. So you've got a natural bandwidth of, what you operate in. Like if you're a 25-year-old guy, you should be between, there's different ways of measuring it, but let's call it like 300 to 1,000. Right? Now, I was at 311, I think, when I...
above the relegation zone.
Yeah, but you're just You're waiting to the end of the season. There's no.
You've got a 6-pointer coming up.
No, it's over. It's over. Right? It's like mathematically, you're still staying up, but as soon as the whistle goes, you're down. Right? You got no.
You're waiting on other results.
You're waiting on other. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. You're waiting on other results. There's that. No. So the trapdoor is opening. It's just a matter of time. Especially as when I had that, I'd cleaned up my diet, my exercise regime, my whole lifestyle. So I would have raised that naturally anyway. And so that's probably about as high as it can be. But and on 90 milligrams, I am above 1,000 at sort of peak level, but only a little bit. So, these are guidelines. The higher you go above that, the more those sort of typical steroid side effects will come through. Your hair will fall out, you'll get acne, you'll get really bad mood swings, you might grow some boobs as well, which, not as good as it sounds. And
so speak for yourself.
And a lot of people have that experience straight away because you go way off the scale. And so... Yeah, I think it's a little, but everyone's different, of course. Everyone has a different experience, and your sort of genetic makeup will probably have a big part to play in there. The thing that I would encourage everyone to do, right? TRT is not for everyone, and part of the reason for that is you might not have low testosterone. You might be totally fine. What you should do, though, I think, is just have a blood test.
Yeah.
They're relatively cheap, and then you'll know, and then you'll have a baseline. I know someone who's done it and as an exploratory thing, and it turns out they're fine and they feel fine as well. So if you haven't got any symptoms to treat, great. But if you're feeling, as I put it to someone, if you're a crotchety old geezer who thumbs in a softie once every 6 months, probably have a blood test.
Yeah, and it is that you sort of don't realise it's a gradual decline where day in, day out, you may not notice it, but every day you could be getting worse and worse and worse. But
well, you are
when you wake up every morning.
But you put it down to, well, that's what being in your mid-40s is like.
Yeah.
And my experiences don't have to be like that.
No.
And it's the same with, women on HRT as well. This part of your life can be very difficult, and part of it is the hormonal imbalance, as that all starts to go out of whack. And there's the ability to get it back into equilibrium. The issue is that, first of all, from an NHS point of view, my low testosterone is not a medical issue.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of women get fobbed off as well in HRT. If you go private, it's more expensive for certain, but you do actually get somebody who is incentivized to find out what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, as we were saying, but what I liked, although he was very, he works for a company that prescribes this, but as he said himself, it's not a magic pill. It's not a magic pill. You can't be, oh God, I nearly said something. You can't be on the Donald Trump diet where you're living on Big Macs and Diet Cokes, because that's not going to help it. You've got to balance it. You can't just think, oh, I'm going to do that. And like with Mounjaro and Ozempic, like we spoke about before, it's a major part of a balanced lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key of middle age now.
Yeah. I mean, it will give you, it should anyway, give you the energy and the recovery powers, if that's the right way of putting it, to get off your ass and do stuff. But you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to want to do it.
And that's the thing. You've got to. You're not going to put that injection in you and turn into the Incredible Hulk. No, it's just not going to happen. But you've got to want to do it. You know, like we were talking about our weight loss journeys earlier on. I was out little things, but it's changing that mindset. Out walking the dogs, doing 4 or 5 miles a day with them, going out playing golf, going out running. It's having that drive to do it.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, that is the thing. You have got to do something. And the way that I came to install these habits is that probably for the first time ever, I was just doing it for me. When I was in my, I may have said this before, when I was in my 20s. I was doing it to be more attractive to other people. Yeah. Right? And that's probably why it didn't stick, because, fuck what other people think.
He's not, ladies and gentlemen. He's a lovely boy.
I think you've got to want to do it. And I don't know how I just got into that mind. It wasn't a conscious decision to say, right, I'm doing this for myself now. It was a reaction to something where I felt it couldn't go on. But
there's a threshold, isn't there, where sometimes you go, enough's enough.
Yeah, it's different for different people. And I don't know, if you don't feel like you're there at the moment, I haven't got a silver bullet to say, well, this is what you should do to get into that mindset. I don't know what it is, and hopefully we'll be able to find someone who can tell us what that is. But you do have to do it primarily for yourself, and then all the other benefits will come with it.
Yeah, but if you're happy, then you're better off than most of us.
yeah, that is true.
Happiness is the most important thing.
I don't think I've ever felt better, like mentally or physically.
And genuinely spending time with you and doing this and being with you, I can see that.
Yeah, it has been really. There's been very few life-changing incidents in my life, I think, there's always road bumps, but, on a relatively straight road. This has genuinely been life-changing.
Yeah.
So I'm a positive role model for that. As I say, it doesn't help with balance. But I would say, what's the worst that can happen? You get a blood test, you know where you are. So I would encourage everyone in their mid-40s to go and do that at the very least. You know where you are.
And the one thing, so as we said, coming off it completely, I know we were talking about the financial situation, but if it wasn't that, or, you had a bad reaction to it, the doctor did say that you can take HCG, which helps restore your levels, your natural testosterone levels. So it's not, you don't have to go cold turkey.
No, and you can have that HCG alongside testosterone as well. I haven't had it. So one of the questions they ask you is your family complete? Because there are fertility implications through getting on this, because basically your own testicles stop producing testosterone, and it may have an impact on fertility, and there are people who will want to start a family for whom that is a consideration. HCG can prevent that. Without it as well, your balls shrink. Won't lie. That takes all the fun out of sitting down quickly.
I mean, let's have a real moment. In my mid-40s, that's not going to be a downside because sometimes they clack against my knees when it's really hot, so that's not a downside.
Well, yeah, exactly. It like tightens everything up a little bit, and as I say, you can.
If I'm running, it sounds like a fucking round of applause.
Well, you can also plonk yourself down on the sofa without any fear, without any fear whatsoever. So that is an example. And I have yet to come across a woman who has said, "Do you know what I really like? A great big pair of dangly balls." So I think that if that's important to you, then take it. Obviously,
come to my hometown for a tenner, you can find one.
But yeah, so you're right, there are other things you can do, but I was reluctant to add more stuff in, especially as my for cosmetic reasons, really, for that, given the audience the audience numbers even lower than this podcast.
And what was another thing that was interesting, where you're as you even said to him, my journey's been so positive. You know, he was surprised because you took that injection and felt great a day, or almost immediately a week.
Yeah, a week.
And he was saying for normal people it's 3 to 6 months. So
for normal people, you cheeky bastard.
You know what I mean? But yeah, it's 3 to 6 months. So but that's not going to be everyone's journey.
No, I mean,
it's interesting.
I took an injection, and like 2 days later, I'm out at 6 in the morning building a shed.
Is that pumping the iron?
No, I was literally bought a shed and erected it in 6 in the morning. About 3 days later, and my wife's like, "You're all right."
And if you knew Marc, that is the further. If you put 100 things that he would be doing, that would be 99th or 100 on his list.
That is, I mean, around the house, I mean, this comes back to something we were talking. It does not take me very long to complete a task. What takes me the most amount of time is getting started on it. Like, see, fixed it, 3 minutes. It's only been like that for 6 months. But then the other positive thing for me is the impact on my energy. Like when you come in from work or being out for the day, you know, you think, oh, do you know what? I'm going to have a sit down first. And that sit down that was meant to be 15 minutes turns into 4 hours, and fuck it, I'll do it tomorrow.
Oh, something that hammer's on.
Yeah.
What am I going to do now? Big Dion Dublin's on.
Yeah, he's pointing up the stairs. I've just watched this. And then, oh, look, there's a 45-year-old episode of Only Fools and Horses. I watch. Gone. I basically do not get tired during the day ever. So I would definitely advocate at least having a blood test and
exploring the options.
Yeah, but there is a lot to think about. You've mentioned it yourself. Is for forever. It shuts off your natural production, so you have to keep pumping this into you forever. Stopping, I think, will be much harder than. You may end up back where you were previously. I think the journey would be a lot rougher than advertised. And it is a logistical commitment as well. You've got to get all the stuff. You've got to get the needles. We spoke about the Mounjaro and Ozempic needles. These are bigger, right?
Again, my thing with needles. Piss myself.
I think you'd be all right, but it's because you can't feel it going. I inject it into my muscle, into my quad every. It's more of a mental thing. It doesn't hurt at all. I'm not even. When you
sound like my prison cell, mate.
Well, it doesn't hurt. And when I go and have a sort of intravenous blood test, as opposed to the finger prick ones that they send you for your initial testosterone thing. They do hurt when they go in a little bit. You think, when they say you feel a bit of a sharp, you feel a bit of a prick.
I know that.
That does hurt when it goes in. You think, oh, fuck.
Hold on. Can we just stop this podcast here 1 minute? I've never been to prison. How would you let me skirt over that?
I thought everyone would know that. I thought that was taken as Yeah, so as unlikely as it seems, Richard has never been to prison. Yet. Yeah, so as you can hear, I've had a very positive experience with it. Richard's scepticism is well-founded and probably reflects the scepticism a lot of people have. Hopefully, some of those questions that I asked went some way to answering questions for you and thinking about what the next step might be. As I say, again, blood test. Can't hurt, can it? And then take it from there. But I will report in periodically on how I'm finding things, whether my dosage is right. I've still got another 6 months to go for my first year, and after that they are satisfied whether your dosage is the right one. So I'll report in periodically about how I'm doing with that. But I think we leave it there.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You know how my mind works. I've now got an image of your Ring doorbell showing you tipping the car over, and that's what I can't wait for. Them getting the dosage all wrong and you lifting stuff up.
Well, I mean, as much as I'm in better shape, I can't say I'm the strongest man in the gym by any means.
It's content.
All right, I will try and maybe I'll move the horse box or something. That needs moving. I'll try and do that. So either there will be a great video on social media very shortly of me doing my Jeff Capes impression, or there'll be dispatches from the local A&E.
If you can get a yellow pages and tear it in half, now that's content.
Who the fuck's got yellow pages these days?
Well, you said Jeff Capes. It took me back to the 80s. That's what you used to do.
True.
Wear a vest, drink a bottle of milk, and tear yellow pages in half. Or a Thompson's Local. I mean, I'm easy.
Well, I will be reluctant.
Got to do all the legwork for you here.
I'll be reluctant to tear one of these in half because they're probably worth quite a bit of money these days. I'm
going to go on eBay straight after this, a fiver.
Right, so we'll leave it there. Me and Richard are both off to find yellow pages or Thompson directories to see if we can.
I'm on Google now.
Rip them apart. Go on, let's get on eBay. How much are they?
There we go. Okay, $7.99. You know me, I'm buying you one now. You rip that bastard in half. £9.03. I can get it by Thursday. In.
Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions about TRT, Dr. Lewis has offered to answer some of those as well. So not just what I reckon or my own personal experiences, but we do have like a channel into someone who knows what they're talking about. But until then, thank you very much for listening, and we shall see you another time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Mum, Dad's got another tattoo!